So, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our March edition of Potrero Group's leadership webinar series. My name is Stephanie Karp. I'm a managing director and I'm a search lead with Potrero Group. We are a leadership and consulting search firm that specializes in supporting mission-driven organizations. It's great to see so many of you folks I've worked with before and hopefully some new friends. I've been with Potrero Group for about 12 years, where, we really started out as a strategy and organizational management firm. We evolved a search practice to meet a need that just so many of our clients have, which is inevitably leaders are going to move on, leadership changes. It happens to every organization. So I've kind of seen the growth and evolution of our search practice firsthand, and we're, starting to see the impacts those leaders we've had that we've placed can have, which is really exciting. Today, we're going to talk about the setup and best practices of search committees as part of an effective leadership transition and executive search process. So, how does a group of often volunteer board members lead a successful search to fill a critical staff position? Joining us today, several of my Potrero Group colleagues are in the room. If you have any difficulties with the Zoom or any questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat or DM them directly. We are going to collect your questions for the panelists separately in the Q&A function. So do make sure it's on the bottom of your screen. If you have a question, we'll do some Q&A as we close today. We want to make sure that we don't lose those in the stream of the chat. So do use the Q&A function for that. And we are recording this session today. So we will share it with everybody who registered in the next few days. And then in the next few weeks, it'll appear on our YouTube channel. So today we want to unpack how a couple of organizations specifically built their search committees, what they experienced during their executive search process, and some of the lessons from their experience and some of the outcomes that they realized. So I am thrilled to be joined today by Kim Morris, board member of Sonoma Botanical Garden in Sonoma, California, and Schele Smith, board member of Wolf Ridge Environmental Learning Center in Finland, Minnesota. Potrero Group worked directly with Kim and Schele and as they led their search committees for their organizations. So I'd love to have you introduce yourselves. Kim, let's start with you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I have been on the Sonoma Botanical Garden board since early 2022. Our search for an executive director took place starting in early 2023. So I'd only been on the board for about a year. I am a lawyer by day, and I primarily do internal investigations. I've done a bunch of wildfire work in my career, as a lot of California lawyers have, both representing the timber industry and plaintiffs, but also on the defense side as well. I got involved with the Sonoma Botanical Garden because I have a home in Sonoma. It was right down the street, and I brought my kids there to have open space to explore during COVID, and just fell in love with the space and learned a lot about it. And then it was on the verge of large scale change, which was part of what fed into our executive director search, and wanted to be a part of it and help them through that.
Great, thanks. And Schele, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. And by the way, is this the time you want us to talk also about a little bit about, should I be talking about introducing Wolf Ridge as well?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. I'm Schele Smith. I'm the current board chair for Wolf Ridge Environmental Learning Center in Finland, Minnesota. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, northern Minnesota, Finland is located about an hour south of the Canadian border. I am located today and most of the time in the Twin Cities, which is about 4 hours south. And we'll be talking a little bit more about how where board members live played heavily into our selection for search committee. My background is in business, management consulting, and I've had experience with leading large scale change across many organizations, including Fortune 500 nonprofits, a recruiting firm. So I was thinking through my client list, both small and large organizations. But I was reflecting that what all of my clients have had in common is that their workforce, by and large, works from a desk in an office with a computer. And the organization that we recruited for, Wolf Ridge, that is true of maybe 5 to 8% of their workforce, and everybody else is in the woods, in the lunchroom, clearly other places. A bit about Wolf Ridge. It is it's one of the largest, we define ourselves in the space of residential environmental learning center. It's one of the largest in the country. You have about 380 beds. I'll just throw a few statistics at you to give you a sense of scale and of what we do. Our We host about 10,000 students annually with their teachers. So K through 12 students, mostly grades 5 to 8, come to our campus. We describe it as a 2,000-acre outdoor campus up very near the Boundary Waters, 5 miles from Lake Superior. Gorgeous campus with 2 dormitories where we can sleep about 380 beds. Our annual budget's about $4 million. Staff-wise, we're at about 50 year-round, and that increases to close to 100 during during different seasonal times, especially summer for summer camp. And we've been around for about 50 years, so that's maybe enough about me and Wolfridge. We'll get to more later. Thanks.
Great, thank you. So I want to ask you both to tell us a little bit about, where was your organization when this transition, the need for this transition occurred? Like, and how much lead time did you have to prepare for the search? Let's start with you, Kim.
Sure. And just to add a little bit more of a background for the Sonoma Botanical Garden, we are a 60-acre botanical garden in Sonoma. There's both an eastern component to our garden. It's a mainly woodland Asian garden, and then we have a western component with a large acreage of California oak trails. And so almost an east meets west garden. So it's not your traditional botanical garden with these beautiful, colorful floral arrangements. We have beautiful savannas of California native flowers and trails and trees. And then we have a very heavily wooded Asian garden with all clippings directly from Asia. And so beautiful magnolia trees, Japanese maples, and the like. And we were where we were getting ready for the transition is that we had a long-standing director who had been with the garden for many, many years, who had left about 2 years prior to me joining the board. And we had the director of the Brooklyn Botanical Garden had moved to Sonoma, and we were fortunate enough to have him come and be our executive director. But he did commit to a 3-year term, with anything after that to be dependent upon where he was with his life. And he stayed for the 3-year term and was transitioning on after that. So I was on the board for about a year when he announced his transition. And his transition was happening quickly. So he was not with us during the executive director search. We had an interim, a longstanding employee who was an interim director during the search. And as an organization as well, we had just rebranded. We were at the Quarry Hill Botanical Garden for a number of years, but we lacked that name recognition. To a lot of people would drive by us and think we were a place to go buy rocks and not necessarily know that this is a beautiful botanical garden. So we had done a rebranding, and with that, we're also going through a site use permit to expand offerings that we could do for educational opportunities and events at the garden to create new revenue sources. And so we knew we were embarking on a very ambitious multi-year planning process. And we needed somebody who could shepherd us through that. And so we had a very targeted set of goals that we wanted to attain with our executive director search. But we also had to run the garden for the time frame it took to get that executive director in place. And so we kind of battled at the beginning about how long do we take to do this, to find the right person while also meeting the needs of the garden. So there was a lot going on at our garden when we engaged the search, and there was a lot that needed to be accomplished during that process as well. So it was a lot to undertake.
And Schele, tell us a little bit about what was happening at Wolfridge.
Right. So our current executive director, if we let him stay through December, I think he would be 40 years at Wolfridge. So we've been told that kind of tenure is, though he hasn't been executive director that entire time, is affiliated with something that search firms called founder syndrome. And so we took advantage where we were very lucky that he gave the board plenty of notice. The board had about 3 years advance notice of his intended retirement date. I think we let staff know maybe, a year and a half into that. Because it was such a long time horizon, we and he'd been such a longstanding employee. We started our search early and we wanted to take advantage of the time to leave plenty of time for that change management phase of getting the organization used to the idea that he would be leaving, and taking the time to elevate some of the internal manager level employees to take over some of the duties that our current executive director has done that we thought we would be unlikely to find in a typical new candidate. So we've had quite a bit of activity going on preparing the organization for the new executive director. And I think what was lucky about the retirement situation is that it's known, it's comfortable, and there's no turning back from it. You can't turn back that fact, right? So it was less dramatic, I think, in a way, because there was that easy, explanation of why a change. Yeah.
Yeah, understandable. Yeah.
Mhm.
So can you speak a little bit to, one of the first important decisions that the board makes is who's going to serve on this committee? And, you're looking for people who can hold a great process and represent different perspectives. So can you tell us a little bit about how you went about choosing folks for your search committee?
Mhm. Um, One thing we learned early on, and I will say we kind of knew it going in, but we started our first listening sessions in December of 24, which feels like forever ago. And yet here we are, and our new executive director has been hired and hasn't even started yet at the organization. But one thing that we anticipated and heard loud and clear is that the um, the number one attribute that gives you credibility at Wolf Ridge is how close do you live to campus. The closer a person lives to campus, the more credibility they have in terms of, do you understand what's going on here? So I've already told you where I live. I did not have that credibility. How could I possibly understand what is going on at Wolf Ridge? So we really chose our search committee with two big criteria in mind. One was proximity to campus. Also, um, now I'm adding a third, so I'll say three. Also, how long have they been affiliated with Wolf Ridge, and kind of a demonstrated depth of understanding of the culture of Wolf Ridge. So people who had ties with some legendary naturalists, friends who'd been long timers at Wolf Ridge, stayed at their places during board meetings. We have two people who could literally walk. They literally do hike to board meetings on campus. So they're a 2 mile hike from joining the board meeting. And I did share this photo for people's enjoyment. So you can see the ones on the left with the long beards are the ones who can hike to campus. The one to my right has the longtime naturalist friends, and then the gal to my right lives in Two Harbors, and she's just finishing up her PhD thesis. She wrote it on Wolf Ridge, so it had significant lot of interviews and interactions with the naturalists, with the program staff, and our graduate student naturalist. So had a lot of input on campus culture. And then we had one not pictured, and she's like me, lives in the Twin Cities, and she was we recruited her to the board with this search in mind. She is a VP of HR for a publicly traded company in the Twin Cities. And that'll get me to my third criteria, which was availability of time. Knowing that we wanted to be on campus to do, meetings, offsites, a lot of staff check-ins, uh, anticipating the meetings, and we'll get to this in the next questions. It's not inconsequential, the time commitment for reviewing candidates, interviewing candidates, hosting on-site interviews. So I'll say pretty much four out of six. 4 out of 6 on our committee we would describe as daytime flexible. And when I was describing the time commitment to our HR professional, she said, "I get it. I'll make time. Like if if I'm not doing this committee, why am I on the board?" Right. So it was really nice to have that commitment. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how we picked ourselves. And I'll just say another theme to that. It was a very intentional and much discussed choice to not include any staff members on the search committee. They wanted a seat. They requested, can we at least have an advisor? There was just a lot of trust work that we had to do and had to be pretty firm about the fact that we would not be having a staff representative on this search committee. And the work paid off. It ended up going fine, but that was that was a topic that came up and needed to get addressed head on early on. Yeah.
Mm.
We
Yeah,
had some similarities and some non-similarities. We had a 7-member all board search committee. We had never contemplated having staff. We have a small staff. And we had never contemplated having staff on our search committee, but we did very much involve them in the process, which I can get to later, which proved to be it helped us to become successful with later integration. But our board, I brought down the average age of our board significantly, and I'm almost 50 when I joined the board. And so our board was a lot of retirees. I have a full-time working job as a partner at a AmLaw 100 law firm. I have 3 children. So I don't know why they selected the person probably with the least amount of daytime hours to contribute to this, but they did. We had requested volunteers from the board to step up to serve. And almost everyone on the board volunteered to serve. And then our board chair actually selected a cross section of board members that he thought would represent different aspects, because we have people on our board who have a significant horticultural background. I do not have that. We have others who have a philanthropic background. And then we have others like myself that have an organizational professional background. I'm on the hiring committee of my firm and hire lateral partners, law school students. And so I think we aimed to have just a cross section of board members on our search committee. But one thing where we were similar to you, Schele, is while I didn't understand this at the beginning, I came to quickly understand it, the time commitment. It was crucial that our search committee members dedicate the time, and it was a lot of time. And I quickly learned through working with the Potrero Group how much time. I hire lateral partners with $10 million books of business, and I put a lot of time into those recruitments, but it didn't come close to scratching the surface with the amount of time we put into this. But it paid off, and I think if we didn't invest that time, we wouldn't have been as successful.
Mm. I want to get into the board staff relationship in just a minute. Before I do, I kind of want to stay in these early decisions. I mean, another early decision is deciding to work with a firm. And I think, Schele, a lot of organizations in your position, for various reasons, maybe wouldn't, because of the location, because of the, kind of the unique culture of the organization. But can you tell me a few reasons why you did decide to, and kind of what your considerations were in deciding who to work with?
Mhm. So we did it. We did our classic, interview, and 3 firms. Potrero stood out to us. I'd say a couple reasons. The biggest reason was we wanted to do a national search, and Potrero, recruits nationally, but also in terms of this credibility with staff. We were hearing right on, the board can't do this. There's no way they understand, we're unique, we're special, we have such a unique culture. And Potrero was able to really come in with the credibility. Just looking at the logo sheet was just my favorite slide to put up in staff meetings, because once they could see Nature Bridge, I came back to the executive director and I said, well, we talked to a firm, and the founder was a director at an RELC, and our executive director said, no way. And I'm like, well, for real? And he's like, no, I know them all. I don't know them. So, and it turns out it was Nature Bridge, right? So that blew him away, that a founder of Potrero it's a very small data set, people who
Yeah.
are ELCs, right? That was pretty remarkable. And so I think that gave the credibility, and I know early on, Andy, basically like every remote, it's a common theme with remote locations of feeling that there is this, you know, can't be duplicated. Nobody understands a special culture. And he was able to work through some of that and saying, we work with a lot of these organizations, and even that theme in itself is a commonality. And that was comforting to us. I had another reason, but I can't, if I think of it, I'll come back to it. I'll let Kim go next.
Well, the decision to hire Potrero was pretty much made before I got involved. Our outgoing executive director, Scott Medbury, who had been an executive director at the Brooklyn Botanical Garden and was with us for 3 years, he understood the challenges we were going to face being conducting a national search, checking all of our boxes, filling all of our requirements. I mean, we're a beautiful wine country. We offer our executive director housing for free because we require them to live there. And it's a beautiful property. And so there's some wonderful things and things that we thought would attract candidates, but we also knew that we had lots of boxes to check. And so I'm glad that we did. And one of the amazing benefits of working with a firm that I hadn't thought of at the beginning as well is we had done some growing of our board, myself included as part of that, in the year leading up to when we had to conduct the search. And with only being kind of a year into my tenure at least, you don't really know what everyone on the board values or might be looking for. And we had to go through a process to really come together as a board as a whole, and then have direction from the board to the search committee about what to look for. And the Potrero Group helped us, and I think most search firms would help you work through the process of understanding yourselves as a board, even what you're looking for, and especially where we had a newer composition, that was critical to us.
Mm.
I remember
Kim, can
my
you...
other thing, Steph, if you want to let me,
Oh,
the,
sure. Yeah.
yeah, once we were assigned, or we had the pleasure of working with Andy Leader, who was supposed to be on today and had an unfortunate timed illness. But there was definitely some concern about they're national. Do they understand Minnesota? You see a theme emerging here, right? And it did turn out that Andy had family in Minnesota, had gone to college in Minnesota, which gave a lot of credibility. But I would just say, just really kudos to Potrero that he was able to, and we scheduled around him, that we timed, he was able to get on campus an astonishing amount and folded visits into family vacations and family holidays and visits. And the we were just really impressed for, the first phone call we made, we were talking to someone in California, how much on-campus presence, sticking within our budget, we were able to achieve. So
Yeah.
that was a wonderful surprise.
Yeah, and just to make clear, this isn't a long advertisement for Potrero Group. I think that the takeaway is, find your people. If
Right.
being on site's really important to you, right? Find a firm that can come be on site with you. If the programmatic operations are really critical, find someone who really understands the nuances of those and can recruit for those intelligently, right? I think that's kind of the key takeaways there. I'm wondering, Kim, if you can speak a little bit to like what makes a search partnership with a firm successful? Like what are kind of what supports that relationship? Are there any things that you found to be keys to success that maybe you didn't initially um, know going into it? Just what advice do you have for, an organization that's going to work with a search firm to hire their next leader?
I mean, you have to put a lot of trust in them and trust the process. I mean, there was some times where the gentleman Cleve who led our search was telling us that we needed to do certain things, like fly 4 different candidates out to meet in person, and that's obviously a significant expense for a small organization like ours that doesn't have a huge operating budget and is already spending a lot of money on the search. And we pushed back a little bit on that initially, and then worked through with our with Cleve all the reasons why that, you know, you cannot go that route. But if going that route, here's what you can glean from it. And it ended up being absolutely critical part of the process for us. And we got there because we had a lot of trust. And Cleve did a very good job building up that level of trust from the beginning, because he came into an organization where a lot of us have not gone through this before. We didn't go through a search, or the board before I was on it did not go through a search committee or even an interview process, because the outgoing long-standing director had been there for such a long time. And then we were contacted by, you know, this wonderfully qualified candidate who is going to be living temporarily in our area, to kind of shepherd us through this transition period. And so this was the first time a lot of people were going through it. And so I think the key to working is making sure you have that trust. And the person who led our search did that by starting from the very basics, you know, with us, by giving us surveys and working. He came to campus as well and worked with us. He's local, so that helped, but worked through some sessions with us as a board to try to understand even ourselves what might be important to us as individuals, and then get us to a collective as to what's most important to us, as a search committee and as a board and an organization as well. And so I think building that trust is critical, because then when you get to those decision points that can make or break the search, if you don't have that trust, then, you know, we might have gone a different direction if we didn't have the full trust in our search leader to make sure that this is what we should be doing.
Yeah. Let's go even deeper into trust building. I mean, we found it's really critical to bring the entire board along, to bring staff along. Schele, can you talk a little bit about how you navigated that, and kind of what you did in your process to make that successful?
Well, you know, it's interesting, Kim, that you brought up some of these decision points of Zoom or in person were pretty central to the how do we run the search. And like your search, we ended up bringing 4 candidates onto campus, which is a big travel ask, you know, I guess we had a couple 2 from Minnesota, 2 from outstate, but the Zoom turned out to be a really useful tool for engaging the wider board. And we'd heard loud and clear from staff when we did our sessions that they wanted the whole board to be engaged in this process. And so we were able to definitely engage during board meetings for sure, but also Zoom, kind of periodic Zoom updates with the board. But even when we had our 4 candidates, they ended up doing a day on site. And then we were tired, right? This felt like a heavy lift, but it's an example, you know, right to your question. Within a week, the candidates then went back home and then logged on and did just a 1-hour, you know, like additional interview with the full board. So we did that hybrid so that the full board could be engaged, and then did our votes with full board as well. Yeah. And we did those remotely or on Zoom. Yeah.
We had a lot going on as an organization because we were going through a site use permit and expansion plans. And so we did not engage the full board. We engaged the full board at the beginning to make sure everybody's views were taken into consideration as far as what profile candidate we were going to look for. And then the search committee really took over. So for the next 3 to 4 months, it was all contained within the search committee with periodic updates about what was going on to the full board. And then we involved the full board, though, at the end stage. When we flew out the 4 candidates and we had them meet with the full board and present to the board. So have a Q&A with the board, present to the board on their vision. It was also critical for those candidates for them to see who we were, and what our organization was about. Also, they're living on campus, so you know, where to make sure that that's compatible, as well. And so we involved the full board at that stage, and then we had feedback forms that they all provided, so that they could have just their views heard as part of that process. And then the search committee considered those views as part of our final consideration for who we wanted to advance for approval by the full board. It was ultimately a decision that was recommended by the search committee, but the full board approved it, which I think is a critical part of the process and might even be required by most bylaws.
Yeah. That's great. Um, She'll tell me a little bit about the role of the outgoing ED in your organization, your search.
You know what? It's still happening. He's still here.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
Um, and just so people know, there's just the timeline of this search. We made our hiring decision. We sent out our offer letter in December. So this is this has been quite a year and a half. He's been amazing. Just it's his native personality. And so I would say there's an extremely high level of trust with that I have now even, and I'm getting the feeling that the executive directors, outgoing and incoming, like to communicate directly with each other. So I'm offering myself as a resource, but not necessarily trying to get in the way of that. And so we've been pretty transparent with him. He was definitely not on the committee. He was not part of any of the, he recused himself during the interviews, during all of staff feedback sessions, and was fine, doing that. So I think you have to put some boundaries on that. But I think heavy involvement is good. And he's going to remain in the area and wants to be a force for good. And so I'm trying to do everything I can to make sure they have a positive relationship moving forward. Yeah.
And ours was the exact opposite. We launched the search committee in December, I think, of 2022, and launched the search officially. I want to say by the beginning of February, I think is when we publicly launched with Potrero and had done the pre-work really to get to that point. And I think our ED left in mid-January. So, and we were with an ED, an interim ED for that period of time. So ours had absolutely no involvement other than introducing us to the Potrero Group, which was a great benefit. And it just is timing in his life. He promised us 3 years, and he gave us those 3 years, and 3 difficult years through COVID as well. But we had always known that he had life transitions that he needed to take care of that might prevent him from extending his tenure beyond those 3 years. And so we had absolutely no involvement from our outgoing ED.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it all. We've seen the whole kind of spectrum, and I think it's a question that almost all, if not all, of our clients kind of come to us with, how should we manage this? Because there's so many different circumstances, and I think, if they can be a resource, if they can help with, continuity of relationships through the transition, it's wonderful. I do think it's really important, as both of you said, to have those clear boundaries around the decision and make sure that the ED sort of isn't involved on the committee, isn't involved in the staff meeting the new people. Like it's good to have a clean boundary there. I agree. Um, I'm wondering, let's talk about some of the challenges that you encountered through the process, that may have surprised you. Shel, do you want to start?
Yeah, I asked to get this question first because it's my favorite one. I have two that I'll just focus on. One was relative to something I learned. I'm just going to say this was a learning that relative to my background, I'm heavy into organizational change, project management, and I kept asking Andy, for a Gantt chart, and to me it seemed so obvious that, what's our timeline? What's our timeline? And it's just professional, but just a little bit evasive. And it became clear as we got into the process how human this and how much intuition and reading of the market there is in terms of when to start to close out, the receiving of resumes. So I would just say that was a huge lesson learned for me. And we had all this time and had a general idea where we're going. And there was just a point where he said, I feel like we should go accelerate. And some of it was, we've got some really great candidates that have already applied. And I'm afraid if we take our whole timeline, we might lose them. And I think some of it was, we're starting to see a fall off. So I think we've gotten, the applications we're going to get. So let's just go. And I've said, great, let's do it. But it was futile to try to plan that. And so some of that did surprise us in a way with that once we got to kind of the month where we were doing, and some of it depends on when our candidates available to do their interviews. So one of the bearded guys you saw who hikes to campus he does month-long vacations, usually with a sat phone, or sometimes he checks in on weekends with a sat phone. And he was just out of pocket, for the so he was like, I'm so sorry, but we, trying to plan that month, and his life just didn't happen. And so I was glad to have a couple of extra people on the search committee, because when push comes to shove, it's hard to plan, too far ahead with those kinds of things. Maybe I'll stop there and let Kim go. Yeah.
I'd probably say the most surprising thing is how much I learned during this process. I mean, you go into it not thinking of it as a learning opportunity for you, but it really became that. And especially through meeting the four candidates, and as they learned more about our organization, and then they fused that with their background and what they thought they could bring to the organization, and the presentations they made to the full board, I feel like myself, as well as my fellow board members, all felt that we learned a great deal about our own organization through that process, which was helpful. We still talk about some of those conversations and some of the decision making that we have right now, and then just professionally for me, I learned a lot too. And I know we're going to get to staff involvement in the process, but as a partner who hires other partners for my law firm, I don't always think to involve my associates or the legal assistants or the paralegals in that process. But I launched the San Francisco office for my firm back in 2019. And so it's a growing office. I'm hiring all the time. And what I found is that we involved the staff during the point, and I'll get to that in a moment, for the Sonoma Botanical Garden search. And I found that doing that greatly helped with integration. And so now I, in my professional career, involve the associate. So I'll have a second year associate sit down and meet with, a $10 million partner during the interview process, because having them feel invested, and, this is a person who's going to be coming in and giving them work day to day, and they're going to have to work with, and who might, become their mentor, sponsor. And so it's taught me different ways of recruiting in my professional career. So learning in that sense, but it taught us all a great deal. And so I encourage anyone who's going to go through a process like this to really go into it, with an open mind about what you can take from it, both in terms of helping your organization that you're conducting the search for, but then also other professional benefits that I gained. But it was really helpful.
Mm. Kim, tell us a little bit more about how staff at Sonoma Botanical Garden were involved from the beginning to the end of the process.
Yeah, I mean, our staff is small. We only have 20 employees, ranging from, landscaper and horticulture and gardeners, to administrative staff. And one of our senior administrative staff was our interim ED. And so we involved them in the initial processes where we were going through and trying to figure out what our ideal candidate would look like. The same survey that the board members took, we gave to staff. Hey, what would you like to see? What is most important to you? And I think they greatly appreciated that. And then we kept them updated on the overall process, because they were obviously interested in timing and when is this going to happen. And so we kept them involved and updated on what the process was looking like. And then on the day that we brought the candidates in, so we brought each of our four candidates in for half a day. And we had them meet with the staff, just them and the staff, and then come meet with the board. And so they had an opportunity to meet with each of the four candidates and provide feedback and thoughts on their meetings with the candidates. And not only was I was actually surprised at the level of appreciation they showed. They sent me emails saying, thank you so much. I think it was almost unexpected unexpected from their perspective, how much we involved them. But having them feel invested in the process, even though we didn't end up with the candidate that some people might have had at the top of their list, I think feeling invested in the process and knowing how invested their colleagues were, and we as a board were, and seeing that, they then felt comfortable with the outcome, even if it wasn't their first choice. And I think it was surprising. We all got to pretty much the same place in a first choice from a majority rule perspective, both the board and the staff, which is nice to see. But when we got to the point where we had to integrate now our new executive director, having that level of familiarity from the process was a great benefit. Because again, you have mostly Spanish-speaking gardeners who this person had to connect with, to, very experienced long-term professionals. And so there's different, people and cultures and ways of working that our new ED had to learn and learn how to work with. And the converse too, that they had to learn how to work with someone new, which is a scary thing, I think, for some people who have been used to working with someone who's more hands off, or who they've been working with for 20 years and they just do their job and they don't have to worry about much interaction with an ED. And so it was very, very helpful to involve the staff.
Mm. Yeah, it's so interesting. Oh, go ahead.
If I could echo something, you reminded me something I wanted to say on this call, Kim, that when you, I've seen this in my professional career too, that when you have a really thorough, well-run process and staff buys into the process, they're so much more likely to buy into the outcome. And same with the board. They're like, well,
Mm-hmm.
we ran a really thorough process and the process yielded this is our number one candidate, right? And you just,
Yeah.
we did not have any issues with some people who liked candidate number two better, but it was like, we trust the process. So that really helped in the end. And you did learn a lot through the process about how people feel about the organization. And
Mm-hmm.
it was just a great opportunity for a lot of conversation. Kind of
Mhm.
make the most of it, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and our organization was, as I mentioned, it was going through change anyway, but then we also, it was very quiet during COVID where, a visitor experience type organization, as you can imagine, during COVID, that fell off and allowed our staff a lot of opportunities to get to projects that they hadn't been
Mm-hmm.
able to get to otherwise. But in order to take our organization to the next level, we had to really focus on the visitor experience and driving memberships and driving attendance and driving the gate. And that is something that our staff really was not prepared to do because it wasn't a focus for so many years. Then COVID happened, but now it's necessary as a sustainable source of revenue and to be able to accomplish what we want to accomplish and introduce new people to the garden. And understanding and learning why that's important, from everybody in the organization, to their future at the garden and to the garden's financial health and the wonderful, exciting things that can come out of this. It was really great that they learned that through the process, alongside even some of the board members as well.
Mm-hmm. I've got a question coming in through the Q&A, and folks, do feel free to keep these coming. And maybe Kim, you can answer this one. Do you involve the interim with the search, or at the end of the search? When and why? What are the advantages and disadvantages?
Yeah, I mean, we involved her in the search in the same way we involved the rest of the staff. And it was critical, and maybe even a little more so. We had the interim director do the tour of the facilities for each of the four candidates
Mm.
to really develop the rapport, knowing that, she would be working with the new executive director to develop that rapport in a really one-on-one space. And then we obviously kept her involved so she could keep staff involved and where we were with everything. But at first we didn't know she was open to apply if she wanted to. And so we didn't know if she would apply or not. And so we really couldn't involve her at the outset. But even when we knew that she was not going to apply for the position, I think, the decision was made. We treat her like we're treating the rest of the staff because she is going to be in a position of working with this person very closely and directly once they came on board.
Mhm. Because your interim was someone within the organization that stepped up into the role. Yeah,
It
which we
was.
which we find really common. Yeah.
Yeah, and someone who's somewhat new to the organization herself. She had
Mm.
only been at the organization for about maybe 2 years when this happened. So she was and came on during COVID, right? So she wasn't there when we were doing the full offering of programming and a visitor experience and the like. And so she was someone who was very good at her job and was very good for the organization, but I think was going to have to learn to work with someone who had a whole new philosophy for the organization that the board was asking for. And so we needed to make sure that she learned alongside the staff, but I think it was appropriate for us in our situation to keep her, treat her similar to how we treated the staff with a little bit more information. Given her role, she had to know more about the search and where we were so she could dissect some information down. But she was more akin to, the staff as part of the process.
Mm. Great. Shel, did you have anything else you wanted to add about kind of how staff were involved in your process or how you built trust with staff?
Yeah, something that I would just like you can, I had to look through my notes because things, you just forget things, a year later.
Mm.
It's getting through, all the notes we had from our first listening session. And I thought this helped. You can't see the reading, but basically we called it Wolfridge Board at a Glance. And that the feedback we got was, when it was what the board's going to be, make this important decision was who is everybody? And that we have a lot of interaction with management level, but not as much interaction with a lot of the organization. And so one of the things that we put together, we did two initiatives just and I think this helps, for all kinds of things. Put together just a quick, reintroducing the board to what's our role, how often do we meet, what are our professional backgrounds, where do we live, what are we all about, what are interesting things about us. And then we also each did a little bio and added that to the website. So the staff has their bios on the website, so people could see our photos, could get a little bit about who is everybody. And so that was just a little tidbit of concrete when they're putting so much trust, and it makes sense in this group of people that they don't spend a lot of time with. It it was, yeah, some of the concrete work we did so that there was a little more familiarity and trust. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. What I love that's coming out in this conversation is that I think everyone anticipates that a new leader is going to bring about culture change, right? And so you're kind of anticipating that. And I think folks underestimate the amount of the opportunity for culture building just in the process itself before you even bring someone on. And I'm kind of hearing that from both of you. There's sort of a moment to with transparency in what you're looking for, with a real openness to including perspectives from staff, reorientation to the board and its purpose. I mean, there's so many opportunities there for you to build mutual understanding, and to create, to enrich your organization's culture and kind of do a reset that we hope everyone takes advantage of. There's not many times like this in an organization's life cycle.
Yeah. And I'd be remiss not to actually also mention the closeness it can bring to the board members themselves.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned, I was only on the board for about a year before my first board meeting we were still doing board meetings by Zoom. And so I'd only probably been, I think, through 3 in-person board meetings with the full board before we launched our search. And so, while I'd socialized with some of our board members, I had a sense of familiarity. It brought me a deeper understanding of how some of my fellow board members, minds work, as to just them personally. I got to connect on a personal level a lot more with some of my board members. And I think, and just learn more about them and their professional backgrounds and their strengths and what they brought to the board and the organization. And that's greatly helped me. I've now served on our nominations committee, and it's helped me understand, okay, we need to recruit this potential board member. I know exactly who to go to, who would connect with that person, because it's a great opportunity to connect with your fellow board members in a very different way than you do just in the overall governance of the organization. And so that was, I think, a great benefit from going through this as well.
Mm. Yeah, Shel spoke to this in the sort of the unpredictability of the timing, or just there's a human element to a search process that
Yeah.
shows up in a lot of different ways. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, as we get ready to close out, I want to ask, and we can start with you, kind of what did you find was really essential to the success of your search at Sonoma Botanical Garden?
A very robust process. I was scared when the timeline was initially laid out for me at the beginning by Potrero Group and the process that they designed specifically for us. After getting some feedback from us, as I mentioned, I have a full-time job and some kids and a husband and lots of other things. And I thought to myself, "You've got to be kidding me! This is so much. The meetings and the dissection and the time, and you want us to be with what, 10 and so it was a lot, and I was scared by that at the outset, and I questioned it whether it was necessary, and had to work with Cleve to understand the why behind everything that they were doing in their process, because it was asking not only a lot of me, but my fellow search committee members as well, and the organization as a whole. And so it's I now recognize in retrospect, and I did at the time too, after working with Potrero to understand the why behind every stage, why it was necessary. But now in retrospect and getting to where we got to with our ED, who, by the way, when I designed who I thought we should have, it wasn't our current ED.
Mhm.
I thought, well, we need someone like Scott, who's like been the executive director of a big botanical garden and who's raised a lot of money and who's done a big organizational change. And our new director fits a lot of those, but not like everything ideally the way I thought. And we developed it not just upon what Kim thought, but what everybody thought our profile. But the search process allowed us to get to the right candidate, not the candidate who any person had in mind at the outset of what this would look like. And I feel like if we had removed any one component of that search, we might not have gotten to who we got to. I mean, our revenue has doubled year over year. Our attendance has doubled year over year. We have great, entertainment and exciting things happening at the garden. We're well on our way to accomplishing a lot of the goals we set out for ourselves. And it's a really exciting time at our organization. And we have the right leader that has taken us there and has done it in a way that's, brought the staff along and that's really invigorated the board in a way that we all didn't expect as well either.
Mhm.
And I see how now where we are today and how we accomplished that search, every single component of that search was critical to that, from what we learned about our own organization to the connection with the staff and to the connection with each other. And so I think my one takeaway that I want people to do, whether you use a firm, whether you do it yourself, be very intentional on what this will look like. And just know it's going to take a lot more time than you think it will.
And can you remind us, because we know Shell's process was very long and had a lot of runway. How
Yeah.
long was your search process kind of from kickoff to getting Jeannie in place?
Yeah, so we formed the search committee. I think we all came together at the end in December of 22. So I joined the board in January 2022, and the search committee was formed in December of 2022. And I think, and we started working with Potrero Group immediately after that. So we worked through the month of January to design, and then we kicked off the search in February. And I called Jeannie, who's our current director, on Mother's Day to give her
Oh.
the good news that we're offering her the position. Because from one mother to another, I
Mm.
hated to interrupt her Mother's Day, but we still joke about that call. And so it was really end of December to mid-May was our process. So
Mm.
it was a little bit more of a compressed time frame, but I mean lengthy, but still compressed, given
Yeah.
all we accomplished.
Yeah. It's so funny how many people we work with that come in and say, we need to do this in 3 or 4 months. And then we hit month 5 and they're like, slow down.
Yeah.
We've got a lot to work through here, which is not to scare anybody, but just to set some realistic expectations.
Mhm.
Um, Shell, what do you think was just critical to the success of your search? It's most important.
I was just preparing remarks, I guess, to the opposite effect. I
Hmm.
would say so. I'll just jump in with
Yeah.
that just to give people encouragement um that I think I already spoke to answer your question. I already spoke to the board staff relations was
Mhm.
pretty critical, and a lot of time on campus was critical. But I would say that as someone who has worked with a lot of project plans and a lot of process change, that you could go about in a way none of it's that specifically critical, that you can design 1,000, 10,000 different processes. And in a way that, hopefully in your organizations, the process itself can add joy, meaningful time to connect with staff, connect outside stakeholders. We engaged with key donors, we engaged with former board chairs, and they really enjoyed it, just being invited to panels. They got a kick out of seeing each other and getting to weigh in with their opinions. And so if I would say there's kind of no wrong way, is there's no one right way, and that a lot of different pathways can get you to the same result. And then I would say just something that Andy would say that gave us a lot of comfort is there you can have a lot of fear of it's that what if the search fails? And he, kept saying, the search continues until it succeeds.
That's
And,
right.
you could
You've said the same thing to us.
the search continues until it succeeds. And that I kept repeating that over and over with, with staff. And that even, if you redid or relaunched a search, much like putting your home back out on the market, right? That just by the luck of who is looking, during that period of time, you could get the same process could yield a very different result. So there's so much of that, kind of chance that enters into it. That just really helped calm us down. So
Oh, that's great.
yeah.
Any other parting advice for your peers and colleagues here, who will soon be in your shoes that you were just in?
I mean, not anything more than what I've offered, other than you can feel free to reach out to me. My contact information, I think, is on the Botanical Garden website, but if it's not, I'm with the firm Baker Hostetler. I'm happy to talk to you to the extent that I can. But just be prepared to commit a lot of time, but it's time very well spent when you end up with the right person who can do wonders for your organization.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
I would offer the same. So if anyone wants to reach towards Stephanie, if anyone wants to talk, I'm open to that. Uh, that I guess I would the advice would be the classic Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind, and that we really thought about that. That guided a lot of our process choices of, who is our ideal candidate that we would like to bring on. And in my ideal candidate, we essentially got the ideal, who we had in mind was someone who would need to, a meaningful amount of notice to give to a job, to move a family across the country, that move, it is going to take time. And some of the last bits of process can take you by surprise. Once you get your candidate, they're like, are we going to do a contract? Or, just thinking through those endpoints and planning ahead so that you're not taken aback with all the last some of the last steps kind of hit you all at once. And so I know that if you do it on your own or your search firm, you get a search firm that you'll do a good job at that. Yeah.
Mm. Well, thank you both. I want to turn it, kind of open things up, have folks come off mute and just kind of have a conversation in the last few minutes. So you can answer questions. Before I do, I'll just do a couple points of process. So let me pull this up here. So we do have, I just want to make sure everyone knows about these webinars happen monthly. Our next one is at the end of April. It is about the board ED relationship or the board CEO relationship. So it'll be similar to a panel like this. We'll kind of dig into some real world examples to tease out what makes that relationship work. What does it look like when it's humming? How can you make it its most impactful and effective in your organization? That's going to be hosted by my colleague Daniel. You can sign up for a newsletter, follow us on LinkedIn. You can register for the webinar right here. I'll just leave this up for just a second. Oh, I've got Andrew's contact information here and not mine, but you will hear from me. I'll send a wrap up to everybody and a thank you as well as a recording of this webinar.